I should have thrown that briefing packet in the trash. Should have deleted the email, blocked Holly Ford's number, gone back to my nice boring core samples. But there I was, 4 in the morning, reading it again with coffee going cold, and my hands doing that thing they did when I knew I was about to make a terrible decision. The satellite data made no sense. That was the problem. 2 miles down beneath the Ross ice shelf, the readings showed something that shouldn't exist. A cavity, sure, subglacial lakes happened all the time. But not like this. Not with those dimensions. Not with that geometric precision that made my chest tight every time I traced the outline with my finger. Rectangular. The word kept bouncing around my head. Natural formations didn't make rectangles. Not perfect ones. Not ones that stretched for what looked like half a mile. I'd spread the thermal imaging across my kitchen table, weighing down the corners with whatever I could find. Peppermill, half-empty bourbon bottle, the ceramic mug my sister made me that said, "World's okayest scientist." The false color gradients showed the ice layers clear as day. I'd been reading ice formations for 15 years, could tell you the difference between pressure ridges and crevasse patterns in my sleep. But that shape at the bottom, that dark blue rectangle surrounded by the warmer signatures of liquid water. My phone buzzed. Holly again. "Logan, stop overthinking. Yes or no?" I'd already said no twice. First time polite, second time firm. But she kept sending data. Gravitational anomalies, magnetic readings that spiked right above the structure, seismic echoes that suggested hollow spaces, chambers maybe. Each new piece made my refusal feel smaller, made that itch in my brain grow stronger. The worst part was knowing her reputation. Holly Ford didn't just push boundaries, she demolished them, then built monuments to herself in the rubble. I'd heard the stories, the Greenland expedition where she'd ignored storm warnings and nearly lost 2 team members. The Siberian permafrost study where she drilled through a methane pocket because stopping would have meant missing her publication deadline. Brilliant, sure. Revolutionary findings, absolutely. But the kind of person who'd step over your frozen corpse to plant her flag. I picked up the thermal printout again. My reflection stared back from the glossy surface. Stubbled face, bags under my eyes, that worried crease between my eyebrows that had become permanent sometime in my 30s. Behind the image, that impossible rectangle waited. 3 years I'd been studying subsurface formations, 3 years of careful measurements, peer reviews, methodology so clean you could perform surgery with it. Safe, predictable. The kind of science that got you tenure, not killed. But also the kind that had me staring at the ceiling most nights, wondering if I'd chosen comfort over discovery. The coffee maker gurgled, telling me it had been on too long. I ignored it, pulled up the funding documentation on my laptop. Ford had serious money behind this. Not just government grants, private backers, the kind with budgets that made NASA jealous. They'd already secured McMurdo Station as a staging point, had permits that must have required congressional approval. This was happening with or without me. Damn it. I typed my response before I could think better of it. Safety protocols non-negotiable. I run all subsurface analysis. Any drilling parameters go through me first. Her reply came so fast, she must have been waiting. Deal. See you at McMurdo. 6 weeks. My hands finally stopped shaking. Started packing instead. The transport flight to New Zealand felt like swallowing regret in 20-hour chunks. Every bump of turbulence, I'd think about that rectangle. About what could make that shape 2 miles under ice that had been there for 15 million years. About what Holly Ford might do to reach it. Christchurch was a blur of gear checks and waivers. Sign here to acknowledge the risk of death by freezing. Initial here for death by equipment failure. Don't forget death by crevasse, death by storm, death by the 100 other ways Antarctica had of reminding you that humans were just visiting. The orientation officer, a weathered woman who'd clearly given this speech too many times, paused when she saw my name on the roster. Ford's expedition? I nodded. Good luck. The C-130 to McMurdo rattled like it was held together by hope and duct tape. No windows in the cargo hold, just the vibration through the jump seats that told you when you'd crossed from ocean to ice. 5 hours of that, trying not to think about what I'd signed up for, trying to focus on the data instead of the stories. McMurdo Station in October was its own kind of chaos. Start of the summer season, researchers flooding in like migrating birds, everyone trying to get their equipment sorted before the weather window opened. The place smelled like diesel fuel and determination, industrial buildings squatting on volcanic rock like they were daring the continent to try something. I found our staging area in Building 191, a corrugated metal warehouse that groaned in the wind. Holly had been busy. Equipment filled half the space: drilling rigs, thermal borers, enough core sampling gear to punch through a small mountain. She'd even brought a documentary crew because of course she had. Nothing said serious science like a camera in your face while you tried to work. "Logan!" Her voice cut through the machinery noise. "About time." Holly Ford looked exactly like her pictures. Black ponytail sharp as a blade, expedition gear so clean it might have been tailored, that smile that said she'd already won whatever argument you were planning. She moved through the equipment like she owned it, which I supposed she did. "Dr. Ford, Holly, we're going to be spending months together." She gestured at the gear. "What do you think?" I thought it looked like overkill, like she was planning to drill to the Earth's core. But I kept that to myself. Walked the rows of equipment instead. The thermal lance setups were military grade, the kind they used for rapid penetration in combat zones. The drill heads, I counted 12 different configurations, including some I'd only seen in mining operations. "Expecting resistance?" She laughed. "Expecting to succeed. Come meet the team." Amber Singh was checking drill alignments, moving with the economy of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Tall, weathered, arms that said she didn't just supervise drilling, she did it herself. She looked up when we approached, eyes tracking from Holly to me with an expression I couldn't read. "Our glaciologist," Holly announced. "Logan, Amber runs the drilling crew, best in the business. Hope you're as good as she says." Amber's handshake could have crushed stone. "We're going deep on this one." "How deep?" "Deep as it takes." Jerry Park was hunched over structural diagrams in the corner, thick glasses reflecting screen light. He barely glanced up when Holly introduced us, just pushed his glasses higher and muttered something about stress tolerances. Engineering type through and through, the kind who'd tell you exactly why something would fail, but help you do it anyway. "The anomaly's geometry," he said without preamble. "It's not just rectangular, it's perfect. Do you understand what that means?" I understood it meant we were either looking at the find of the century or the biggest measurement error in Antarctic history. Peggy Lee actually bounced, when Holly called her over. Young, maybe early 30s, with the kind of enthusiasm that hadn't been weathered down by enough disappointments yet. Her workspace was covered in printouts, comparison images, what looked like architectural blueprints. "Pre-ice civilization," she said before Holly could introduce us. "Has to be. The magnetic anomalies alone suggest refined metals, possibly even—" "Dr. Lee specializes in speculative archaeology," Holly interrupted. "She's here to document whatever we find." Whatever we find. Like it was certain. Like 2 miles of ice was just an inconvenience. Jackson Cochran was working on the thermal borers, hands moving with careful precision over the equipment. Quiet, focused, the kind of technician who spoke through their work instead of words. The burn scars on his hands told their own story. Someone who'd learned the hard way that ice could bite back. "Jackson's our thermal specialist," Holly said. "He'll be handling the deep penetration once we breach the first mile." The first mile. Like that was the easy part. "I want to see the drilling protocols," I said. Holly's smile flickered, just for a second. "Of course. Let me get the documentation." She walked away, leaving me with the team. They went back to work, but I caught the glances. The way Amber's jaw tightened. The way Jerry's fingers paused over his keyboard. Something unspoken hanging in the warehouse air. I spent the next 2 hours going through equipment specs. Everything looked standard at first glance. Safety margins within acceptable parameters. Thermal cutoffs where they should be. But something nagged at me, the way a calculation feels wrong before you find the decimal error. "Logan?" Holly was back, tablet in hand. "The drilling parameters you wanted." I scrolled through the documentation. Depth targets, pressure tolerances, thermal expansion coefficients. All of it clean, professional, exactly what you'd submit to a review board. Too clean, maybe. Too perfect. "I need to see the actual equipment settings." "Those are the actual settings, on the machines." That smile again, but colder this time. "Of course, Jackson can show you." Jackson led me to the primary thermal lance, explained the controls in his quiet voice. Standard interface, digital displays for depth and temperature, automatic cutoffs for safety. I cycled through the menus, checking each parameter against the documentation. Everything matched, until I found the secondary protocol menu buried 3 layers deep in the system diagnostics. "What's this?" Jackson shifted, glanced toward where Holly was talking with the camera crew. "Override settings." "Override for what?" "Depth restrictions, temperature limits." His voice dropped lower. "She had me install it last week, said it was for emergencies only." I pulled up the modified parameters. The safety margins weren't just pushed, they were obliterated. Depth limits extended by 40%. Thermal cutoffs disabled entirely. Pressure warnings redirected to a secondary display that could be muted. She'd turned a scientific instrument into a battering ram. "Does the rest of the team know?" He shook his head. "Just me, and now you." I stared at those numbers, feeling that familiar tremor in my hands. 2 miles of ice was dangerous enough with every safety protocol in place. What Holly had programmed here wasn't exploration, it was excavation at any cost. The kind of modifications you made when reaching the target mattered more than who survived the journey. "Dr. Ford?" I called across the warehouse. "We need to talk." She was already walking toward me, tablet clutched like a weapon, that smile sharp enough to cut ice. Behind her, the camera crew started rolling. The ground-penetrating radar painted pictures I'd never seen in 15 years of subsurface work. Not the usual jumbled mess of ice layers and bedrock. This looked like someone had drawn blueprints under 2 miles of solid glacier. I watched the display while Amber guided the sensor array across our marked grid. Each sweep revealed more impossible geometry. Perfect right angles, uniform corridors branching off at precise intervals, chambers arranged in patterns that made my teeth ache looking at them. "Jesus Christ," Amber muttered, adjusting the frequency. "You seeing this?" I was, and trying real hard not to jump to conclusions. 20 years of fieldwork teaches you that nature loves playing tricks. Salt domes can look like perfect spheres. Lava tubes run straight as subway tunnels. But this... Peggy practically vibrated next to me, clutching her tablet. "Those are halls, living spaces. Look at the proportions. They follow mathematical ratios." "We don't know what they are," I said, keeping my voice steady. Lewis had his camera rolling, and the last thing we needed was wild speculation on film. Could be natural ice caves. Thermal venting creates all kinds of formations. But even as I said it, I knew I was reaching. The display showed chamber after chamber, each one identical in size, 3 meters high, 2 meters wide, like someone had taken a cookie cutter to the bedrock. Holly leaned over my shoulder, close enough I could smell her coffee breath. "Natural formations don't build in grids, Logan." I pulled up historical data on my tablet, searching for anything similar. Volcanic activity, tectonic shifts, even meteor impacts. Nothing created patterns like this. The chambers stretched for what looked like half a kilometer in every direction from our drill site. All at the same depth, all the same dimensions. "Run thermal," I told Amber. She switched sensors, and the display bloomed with color. Most of the ice read the expected deep blue of -40. But the chambers... "They're warm," Peggy whispered. "Not warm exactly. Maybe 5 degrees higher than surrounding ice. But at that depth, any temperature variation meant something. Either geological activity we couldn't detect, or..." I stopped that thought cold. "Stick to the data." "Could be geothermal," Jerry said, adjusting his glasses. "Volcanic heat rising through cracks." "Where's the gradient?" I pointed at the display. "Geothermal heat dissipates. Gets cooler as you move away from the source. These chambers all read the same temperature." Louis moved closer with his camera. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we need more data before we say anything." But Peggy had already pulled up her magnetic surveys. "Look at this. Every chamber shows the same anomaly. Like there's metal down there. Refined metal, not ore deposits." I studied her readouts. She wasn't wrong. The magnetic signatures looked artificial, too pure, too concentrated. Natural iron deposits came mixed with other minerals. These readings suggested something processed, something made. Holly straightened up. "How long to reach the first chamber?" 18 hours, Amber said. "Maybe 20 if we hit hard ice." "We go tonight." I turned to face her. "We need to analyze. We've got a 3-day weather window. After that, storms could shut us down for weeks." Holly's eyes had that look I'd learned to recognize. Decision already made. "Prep the thermal lance. We start drilling at 2100. The rest of the day blurred past in preparation. I double-checked every piece of equipment, ran diagnostics on the drilling capsule, tested the emergency ascent systems twice. Jackson worked on the thermal borers, careful to keep the override settings hidden from the camera crew. Jerry spent hours studying the radar images, measuring angles and distances. Every calculation made him paler. The mathematics, he kept muttering, it's too perfect. By evening, we'd mapped out a descent path to the nearest chamber, straight down through 2 miles of ice, then a lateral bore through 50 meters of what looked like solid rock. The capsule could handle it, barely. 3-person capacity meant skeleton crew only. I'm going, Holly announced at dinner. Need someone on cameras and someone who actually knows what they're looking at. She meant me. Of course she did. Lewis raised his hand. I'll run cameras. This is why you brought me. The kid had guts. I'd give him that. Most documentary crews stayed topside, edited footage from the comfort of heated buildings. But Lewis wanted the real story, even if it meant cramming into a metal tube and dropping through 2 miles of crushing ice. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept running scenarios in my head. Equipment failures, ice shifts, pressure buildup, all the ways 2 miles of glacier could kill you. But underneath the rational concerns, something else gnawed at me. The patterns were too deliberate, too intentional. Nature created amazing things. Crystal caves, basalt columns, perfect spheres of rock. But nature didn't build in grids, didn't maintain uniform dimensions across hundreds of chambers, didn't generate magnetic signatures of refined metal. Peggy was right, even if I couldn't admit it yet. Something had built those structures. The question was what, and more importantly, when. Morning came too fast. We suited up in the drilling shelter, thermal gear rated for the deep cold we'd hit in the bore shaft. Holly checked her tablet one last time while Louis tested his camera rig. 4-hour descent, I reminded them. We take breaks every 30 minutes to check pressure equalization. Holly nodded absently, already focused on whatever waited below. Louis gave me a thumbs up, but his hands shook slightly as he adjusted his harness. The drilling capsule looked like a metal coffin with windows. 3 seats crammed inside, barely room to move. Life support for 12 hours, emergency beacon, backup oxygen. All the safety gear in the world didn't change the fact we'd be threading through a 2-inch thermal bore, surrounded by ice that wanted to crush us. We strapped in just after dawn. Amber ran final checks from the control station. Jerry monitored structural readings. Peggy watched with an expression I couldn't read. Envy, maybe, or relief she wasn't going. Descent commencing, Amber announced. The capsule lurched, then began its slow slide into darkness. The thermal bore glowed faintly ahead of us, walls of ice polished smooth by the lance's passage. Our lights caught impossible blues and whites, ice compressed over millennia into something denser than stone. First hour passed quietly. Louis filmed everything, narrating in whispers. Holly studied readouts on her tablet. I watched the depth gauge tick steadily downward. 500 meters, 1,000. At 1,500 meters, we hit the first anomaly. The ice changed, still frozen, still solid, but threaded through with something else. Thin veins of... I leaned closer to the window. Are those lights? Louis aimed his camera at the walls. Not lights exactly, more like phosphorescence. Pale green threads pulsing through the ice in slow, rhythmic patterns. I'd seen bioluminescence in ocean samples, algae that glowed when disturbed. But nothing survived at this depth, this pressure, this cold. Mineral deposits, I said, not believing it. Probably copper oxidation. Holly smiled slightly. Copper doesn't pulse, Logan. She was right. The threads brightened and dimmed in waves like circulation, like something breathing. I made notes on my tablet, tried to estimate the chemical composition from color alone. Came up empty. We descended deeper. The threads grew thicker, more numerous. Entire sections of ice wall glowed with that sick green light. Lewis's camera couldn't capture it properly. Too faint, too strange. But we all saw it, felt it somehow. 2,000 meters, I announced. The capsule shuddered slightly. Normal at this depth. Pressure did funny things to metal. But Holly gripped her tablet tighter and Lewis stopped filming. More ice, more threads. They formed patterns now, connecting in networks that reminded me uncomfortably of neural pathways, or circulatory systems, or circuit boards, Louis said suddenly. They look like circuit boards. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But the patterns did look deliberate, organized, purposeful in a way that made my skin crawl. At 2,500 meters, the threads covered entire walls. The capsule moved through a tunnel of dim green light, pulsing in rhythms that seemed almost like communication. Holly pulled up the radar data, overlaying our position. We're close. Another 500 meters to the first chamber. 500 meters. 15 minutes at our current descent rate. I checked the capsule integrity for the 10th time. All green lights. But green meant something different down here. 3,000 meters. The capsule broke through. 1 second we were surrounded by glowing ice. The next, empty space. Vast, empty space. Our lights swept across a cavern that shouldn't exist. Couldn't exist. The ceiling arched 50 meters above us, carved from solid rock with impossible precision. The walls. "Stop descent," I ordered. Amber's voice crackled through comms. "Confirm position. You're showing open space." "Confirmed. We've breached into something." Holly was already unstrapping, pressing her face to the window. Louis scrambled for his camera, trying to capture the scale of it. I focused on keeping us alive. "Atmosphere reading?" "Nitrogen-oxygen mix," Holly read from her screen. "Pressures low but breathable. Temperatures..." She paused. -5 Celsius. 35 degrees warmer than it should be. I ran the calculations. No geothermal venting, no volcanic activity, no explanation for air this warm, this deep. "There," Louis pointed. Our lights caught edges, angles, surfaces too regular for nature. As the capsule rotated slowly, the full structure came into view. A building, no other word for it. Carved from the cavern wall or built into it, I couldn't tell. 3 stories of precise geometric architecture. Doorways rectangular and tall. Windows, or what looked like windows, placed at regular intervals. The whole thing covered in patterns, symbols, writing maybe. Deliberate marks made by deliberate hands. "Holy shit," Louis breathed. I couldn't argue. "Set us down," Holly ordered. "Away from the structure. We need photos, measurements, samples. We need to follow protocol," I countered. "Full environmental assessment, structural analysis. We don't know if it's stable." Holly turned to look at me, really look at me. In the green-tinted light of the cavern, her face looked alien, hungry. "Logan, we're looking at proof of ancient civilization in Antarctica, pre-ice civilization. This changes everything, which is why we do it right." But she was already pulling out equipment, preparing for EVA. Louis checked his camera battery, hand steady now that we'd found something worth documenting. The capsule touched down on what looked like a carved floor, smooth stone cut in massive blocks, fitted together without mortar. Our lights played across the surface, revealing more of those symbols. Mathematical, linguistic, purposeful. Holly cracked the hatch before I could stop her. "Wait!" Air rushed in. Not out. In, like the cavern had lower pressure than our capsule. I grabbed the atmospheric sensor, took readings. Nothing toxic, nothing immediately dangerous. Just wrong. All of it wrong. "We go slow," I said, knowing she wouldn't listen. "Document everything. Touch nothing." Holly stepped out first, boots clicking on stone that hadn't seen human presence in how long? Thousands of years. Millions. Before the ice, Peggy had said, when Antarctica was green. Louis followed with his camera. I came last, emergency beacon in one hand, sensor array in the other. The cavern stretched beyond our lights in every direction. More structures emerged from shadow, buildings, passages, things I didn't have words for. But Holly headed straight for the main structure. The temple, my mind supplied, though I tried to stop it. Don't assign purpose. Don't assume function. Just observe. Up close, the carvings became clearer. Not random decorations, but information. Diagrams. Star charts, maybe, or mathematical proofs, or languages we'd never seen. They covered every surface in neat rows, as fresh as if they'd been carved yesterday. No weathering, I noted aloud. No erosion, like time stopped when the ice came. Holly ran her fingers over the symbols, or like something preserved it, protected it. I wanted to pull her back, tell her about contamination protocols, archaeological preservation, 100 rules she was breaking. But the hunger in her eyes had spread to me. We were looking at impossibility, at history that couldn't exist. "The door," Louis said. A rectangular opening, 3 meters tall, proportioned for something roughly human-shaped but wrong in subtle ways. Too tall, too narrow, built for bodies that moved differently than ours. Holly started toward it. "We mapped the exterior first," I said firmly. "Establish a baseline before—" She walked through the doorway without slowing. Lewis looked at me, camera still rolling. We both knew what we should do, what protocols demanded, what safety required. We followed her inside. The thing came out of the ice like a nightmare made of glass. We were maybe 20 minutes into mapping that first chamber when Louis spotted movement in the wall. Not the phosphorescent threads we'd been seeing. This was different. The ice itself seemed to ripple, then bulge outward like something pushing through from the other side. "What the hell is that?" Holly moved closer, tablet forgotten in her hand. I grabbed her arm. "Don't." But she shook me off, stepping right up to where the ice buckled and stretched. Through my headlamp beam, I could see something massive shifting behind that frozen barrier, translucent, pulsing with its own inner light. Then it broke through. The organism, because what else could you call it, flowed out of the wall like liquid glass poured into the shape of a jellyfish. Except jellyfish don't grow to the size of compact cars. And they sure as hell don't have dozens of tendrils that move with purpose, reaching out, testing the air. Jesus Christ. Louis had his camera up, hands steady despite the tremor in his voice. "Are you getting this? Tell me you're getting this." The thing hung there, suspended somehow despite its mass. Its body contracted and expanded in slow waves, internal structures visible through the translucent flesh. Looked like organs maybe, or machinery. Hard to tell where biology ended and something else began. That's when it noticed our equipment. The tendrils moved faster than anything that size should. One moment they were drifting, the next they'd wrapped around the drilling rig's support struts. More tendrils followed, dozens of them, exploring every surface with what looked like deliberate curiosity. "Back away," I said. "Everyone back to the capsule, now." Holly didn't move. She stood there watching as those tendrils found the thermal lance assembly, tracing its contours like blind fingers reading Braille. "It's examining the equipment. I don't care what it's doing. We need to—" The organism pulsed. A wave of bioluminescence rippled through its body, and suddenly every piece of electronic equipment we had started acting up. My atmospheric sensors went haywire, displaying impossible readings before shutting down completely. Louis cursed as his camera flickered. "Unknown contamination risk," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "We have no idea what this thing is made of. What it might release into the air could be toxic, could be the discovery of the century." Holly already had the thermal cutter in her hands. I knew that look. Seen it before in Greenland, in Siberia. The look that said protocols were about to become suggestions. Don't even think about it. She fired up the cutter anyway. The blade glowed orange hot, designed to slice through ice and rock. Just a small sample, for analysis. "Holly, I'm serious. We don't know what we're dealing with here. That thing could have defense mechanisms, could release spores, could—" She moved before I could stop her. Quick, precise, the way she did everything when she'd made up her mind. The thermal cutter swept toward one of the trailing tendrils. The organism reacted instantly. Every tendril contracted, pulling tight against our equipment. Metal groaned under the pressure. But Holly kept cutting, and a piece of translucent flesh dropped to the stone floor, writhing like a severed worm. The main body shuddered. Bioluminescence flared so bright I had to shield my eyes. When I looked again, the tendrils were releasing our equipment, withdrawing back toward the ice wall. The creature, or whatever it was, flowed backward into the hole it had emerged from, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Holly scooped up the sample with forceps, dropping it into a containment cylinder. The severed piece twisted and coiled, very much alive. "That was incredibly stupid," I said. She sealed the container, checking the integrity locks. "That was necessary. We can't analyze what we don't have." The journey back to the surface took 4 hours. 4 hours of me staring at that sample container, watching the tissue inside pulse with its own faint light. Holly kept the cylinder in a cooled transport case, but I could still see the glow leaking out around the seals. Louis stayed quiet most of the way up, reviewing his footage on the camera's small screen. Every now and then he'd mutter something under his breath. Couldn't blame him. We'd just made first contact with something, and Holly had immediately attacked it with a thermal cutter. Station protocol required immediate reporting of any biological discoveries. Soon as we cleared the surface, I headed straight for Theo McDonald's office while Holly took her prize to the lab. McDonald sat behind his desk, like he'd been carved from the same stone as the mountain. Gray eyes tracked me as I laid out what happened. The organism, the contact with our equipment, Holly's impromptu surgery. You're telling me Ford cut a piece off an unknown life form 2 miles beneath the ice? Yes, sir. His jaw tightened, and brought it into my station. In full containment. Dr. Lee is examining it now under biohazard protocols. Lee, McDonald stood, all 6 feet 2 inches of former military bearing. The archaeologist? She has doctorates in biochemistry and xenobiology too. Published papers on extremophile organisms. He stared at me for a long moment. I want hourly reports. Any change in that sample's behavior, any sign of contamination breach, you notify me immediately. Yes, sir. And Alvarez? Next time Ford decides to play alien surgeon, you stop her. That's an order. I wanted to tell him that stopping Holly Ford was like trying to redirect an avalanche with harsh language, but I just nodded and headed for the lab. Peggy Lee had commandeered the station's primary isolation chamber. Through the observation window, I could see her working in full hazmat gear, the tissue sample secured in a sealed examination unit. Multiple cameras recorded every angle while sensors monitored for any atmospheric contamination. The sample had stopped writhing. Now it pulsed slowly, steadily, like a piece of detached heart muscle that didn't know it was supposed to be dead. Initial analysis shows cellular structure unlike anything in our databases, Peggy said through the intercom. It's organic, definitely, but the biochemistry is odd. Odd how? The cells appear to be restructuring themselves in real time, adapting to the laboratory environment. She adjusted one of the cameras. I've never seen anything like it. Neither had I, and that worried me more than I wanted to admit. The next morning, Holly decided we needed to go back down. One sample isn't enough, she said over breakfast. We need more data, more specimens. The organism retreated, but there could be others. And we still haven't properly explored the structure. I pushed eggs around my plate, appetite gone. McDonald wants us to wait, run full analysis on what we have before. McDonald doesn't make discoveries by waiting. Holly leaned forward. That chamber could hold answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet. Every hour we delay is an hour wasted. She was right, of course. Didn't make it any less reckless. The second descent went faster. We knew what to expect now. The phosphorescent threads, the vast cavern, the impossible architecture. But this time, Peggy came instead of Lewis. Said she wanted to examine the structure's entrance area more carefully. Should have known she had other plans. We'd been in the chamber maybe an hour when Peggy called out from near the building's entrance. She'd found something partially buried in debris, looked like accumulated ice crystals and stone fragments from centuries of minor collapses. Bones, she said, brushing away the detritus with archaeological precision. Intact skeletal remains. Holly and I converged on her position. There, emerging from the debris, was a skull, but not like any human skull I'd ever seen. The cranium was elongated, stretching back in an oval that added maybe 30% more volume than normal. Ridge-like structures ran along the sides where temporal bones should be smooth. Could be artificial cranial modification, I said, though even as the words left my mouth I knew they were wrong. Some cultures practiced head binding to... No. Peggy's gloved fingers traced the bone structure. This is natural growth. Look at the suture patterns, the bone density. This isn't deformation, it's evolution, or design. Holly already had containment bags out. We take it up, full specimen if possible. Wait. I grabbed Peggy's wrist as she reached for the skull. We can't just... This breaks every quarantine protocol we have. Unknown biological material, potential pathogen exposure. It's been frozen for thousands of years, Holly said. Any biological contamination would be long dead. Like the organism in the wall was dead? The one that emerged very much alive after who knows how many millennia. But they weren't listening. Peggy carefully extracted the skull, revealing more bones beneath. Ribs, vertebrae, all showing the same subtle wrongness. Too long, too thin, joints that bent in ways human joints shouldn't. They bagged everything they could recover. I documented each breach of protocol in my tablet, knowing it wouldn't matter. When Holly Ford decided something needed doing, it got done. The skull came up with us. Peggy cradled the containment case like a newborn, eyes bright with the fever of discovery. We'd found proof of something. Previous inhabitants, different evolution, visitors from somewhere else. The possibilities spiraled out like the phosphorescent threads in the ice. MacDonald nearly had an aneurysm when he found out. But the skull was already in the lab, secured in its own isolation chamber next to the tissue sample, which is why I was there at 6 a.m. the next morning checking the containment protocols when I noticed something wrong. The tissue sample had changed. I stood at the observation window, coffee forgotten in my hand, staring at what should have been impossible. The sample Holly had cut from the organism, maybe 200 grams of translucent flesh, had tripled in size overnight. The containment cylinder, rated for extreme pressure differentials, bulged outward. Inside, the organism pressed against every surface, testing the boundaries of its prison. Bioluminescence pulsed through it in waves, brighter than before. Patterns of light that almost looked like communication. I checked the temperature logs. -15 Celsius, constant, cold enough to freeze any Earth-based biological process. But this thing was thriving, growing, adapting to conditions that should have killed it. Tendrils had formed along its surface, tiny ones, nothing like the massive appendages we'd seen in the cavern, but definitely the same structures. They pressed against the cylinder walls in systematic patterns, top to bottom, left to right, testing every square centimeter for weakness. My hand was reaching for the contamination alarm when Peggy walked in, tablet in one hand, coffee in the other. She froze when she saw the cylinder. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "That's not possible." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Lot of that going around lately." She moved to the monitoring station, fingers flying over the controls. Data scrolled past. Temperature, pressure, atmospheric composition inside the container. All normal. All completely inconsistent with what we were seeing. "It's metabolizing something," she said. "Has to be. Nothing grows without energy input." "Metabolizing what? There's nothing in there but the sample and sterile atmosphere." Peggy pulled up the spectrographic analysis from yesterday. Then she ran a new scan, comparing the two. Her face went pale. "It's converting the nitrogen," she whispered. "Somehow it's breaking down atmospheric nitrogen and using it for whatever this is. That's impossible. The energy required to break those molecular bonds would be enormous." "Yes." She turned to face me. "Unless it's using a process we don't understand. Unless its biochemistry operates on principles we haven't discovered yet." We stood there, two scientists faced with evidence that everything we thought we knew might be incomplete. The organism pulsed in its container, tendrils exploring, searching, learning. "We need to tell MacDonald," I said. "We need to tell everyone." Peggy's eyes never left the cylinder. "This thing isn't just alive, Logan. It's adapting, learning, growing under conditions that should be lethal." She was right. Whatever we'd brought up from that cavern, it wasn't just some prehistoric remnant. It was active, aware, and getting stronger by the hour, and we'd brought it right into the heart of the station. The container's seams started bulging at 7 that morning. I was running my third round of atmospheric checks when I heard the metal groan, that deep structural sound that makes your teeth ache. The tissue sample had grown overnight from tennis ball to basketball size, and now it was testing the limits of military-grade containment rated for deep-sea pressure. Peggy stood at the observation window, one hand pressed against her temple. She'd been doing that more often the past 12 hours, said the headaches came in waves. "It's accelerating," she said. Her voice had that distant quality people get when they're fighting through pain. "The growth rate. Look at the density readings." I checked the monitors. The organism wasn't just expanding, it was getting denser, packing more mass into the same space, like it was building something inside itself. The bioluminescent pulses had shifted from random flickers to steady rhythms. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off. Repeat. "We need a bigger container," I said. "We need to kill it." Peggy turned from the window and I saw her eyes were bloodshot. Before it, she stopped mid-sentence. Her head tilted like she was listening to something. Then she spoke again, but the words came out wrong. Not English, not any language I'd heard. Guttural sounds that made my skin crawl. "Peggy," she blinked hard, shook her head. "Sorry, what was I saying?" The intercom crackled. "Logan, get down to medical." MacDonald's voice, tight with control. Now. Medical was 3 corridors over. I found Jerry Park sitting on an examination table while Dr. Lee, our station physician, not the archaeologist Peggy, checked his pupils with a penlight. Jerry kept turning his head toward the south wall, the direction of the drill site. "When did this start?" I asked. Dr. Lee didn't look up from her examination. 4 hours ago. He came in complaining about dreams. Now he's... She gestured at Jerry, who was still staring at the wall. "I can see them," Jerry said. His voice was calm, matter of fact. "The cities, under the ice, they're not ruins, they're sleeping." My stomach clenched. Jerry was our most grounded team member. Pure engineering logic. If he was talking about visions. "How many people are affected?" Dr. Lee finally met my eyes. 7 so far. Everyone who spent more than 10 minutes near the specimens. The symptoms vary. Headaches, auditory hallucinations, vivid dreams. But they all describe the same things. Cities, voices, a pull toward the drilling site. "The skull," I said. "Where is it?" "Still in Lab 2. "Why?" I was already moving. The hallways blurred past, gray walls, fluorescent lights, the constant hum of ventilation. Lab 2's door required my key card and thumbprint. Inside, the skull sat in its sealed case on the center table. The vibration hit me as soon as I entered. Not sound exactly, lower than that. The kind of frequency you feel in your bones. My equipment was going haywire, tablet screen flickering, atmospheric sensors throwing error codes. The skull looked different in the harsh lab lighting, those elongated proportions, the ridge structures along the cranium. But now I noticed other details. The bone itself had a crystalline quality, like it had been partially mineralized, and deep in the eye sockets, a faint phosphorescence, the same green as the threads in the ice. I pulled out my frequency analyzer. The readings made no sense. The skull was generating electromagnetic pulses at 37 Hz, brainwave frequency, gamma range, the frequency of consciousness. Back in Lab 1, the tissue sample had split the container's top seal. A tendril the thickness of my thumb protruded through the gap, waving slowly in the air. Testing, searching. I hit the emergency containment protocol. Steel shutters slammed down over the observation window. Backup power kicked in. The lab went into full isolation. Through the intercom, I could hear Holly arguing with McDonald in the command center. Her voice carried that special brand of controlled fury she saved for obstacles. "Can't just abandon the site. We're on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history." "Your team is compromised," McDonald shot back. "Whatever's down there, it's affecting them neurologically. Side effects, temporary. We push forward." I left them to it and went looking for Peggy. Found her in the data analysis room, surrounded by printouts and tablet screens. She looked up when I entered, and her pupils were dilated despite the bright overhead lights. "It's not random," she said before I could speak. "The patterns, the growth rate, the EM frequencies, the neural effects, it's all connected." She showed me her screens. Biorhythm data from affected crew members, electromagnetic readings from both specimens, seismic data from the drill site. When you overlaid them, they synced. Same frequency, same pulse pattern. "They're components," I said, the realization hitting like cold water. "Not separate organisms, parts of something bigger." Peggy nodded. "The tissue sample, the skull, those things in the ice, even the temple structure. It's all one system. One intelligence that's been dormant under 2 miles of ice for how long? Thousands of years? Millions? Why preserve it? Why the ice?" "Protection," she said. "Not from the cold, from us, from the surface world. The ice was a barrier, keeping it separate until we drilled through." The lights flickered. Down the hall, an alarm started beeping. Equipment malfunction in Lab 1. When we got there, the tendril had grown. It now reached halfway across the lab, branching into smaller filaments that explored every surface. The main mass inside the container pulsed with light that hurt to look at directly. "It's trying to establish contact," Peggy said. Her voice had that dreamy quality again. "Using us as bridges. Our neural pathways are similar enough to theirs. It can work through us, influence us, show us what it needs us to see." "That's not contact," I said. "That's invasion." But even as I said it, I felt something. A pressure at the base of my skull. Images flashing too quick to process. Geometries that shouldn't exist. Cities that grew like living things. Entities that moved between states of matter like we move between rooms. Holly burst through the door. "We're going back down. Now." "The hell we are," I said. "The site's active. Thermal imaging shows movement throughout the cavern system. If we don't document this now..." "Holly, look around. Half the crew can't function. That thing is breaking containment. We need to evacuate, not dive deeper." She pulled out her tablet, showed me the screen. Thermal readings from our sensor array at the drill site. The images made my mouth go dry. The hotspots weren't random. They formed patterns, the same mathematical ratios Peggy had identified in the temple structure. And they were spreading. What had been a single cavern was now a network, extending beneath the ice in all directions. "It's not just one organism," Holly said. "They're emerging everywhere the ice has thinned." The drilling was just the trigger. This was always going to happen. The only question is whether we're there to witness it. I stared at the screen. Dozens of heat signatures, each one matching the profile of our tissue sample. They were moving upward through the ice, slowly but steadily, following the path we'd carved. "How long until they reach the surface?" Holly's smile had no warmth in it. "At current rate, 48 hours. Behind us, the tendril found the lab's ventilation grate. It began forcing itself through the gaps, disappearing into the station's air system. The main mass pulsed brighter, and somewhere in the distance, I heard voices. Not human, not anything that had ever walked under an open sky. The Antarctic had kept its secret for millennia. Now we'd broken the seal, and whatever slept beneath the ice was waking up. The first sign came through the seismic monitors at 8:43 that morning. I was standing in the observation corridor, watching Peggy through reinforced glass as she studied the tissue sample's latest growth patterns when every screen in the station started showing interference. Not static exactly, more like waves, ripples spreading outward from the drill site on the real-time feeds, each pulse matching the rhythm of that thing in our lab. "You seeing this?" Jerry's voice crackled through the intercom from the monitoring station. The connection kept cutting out between words. I jogged down the corridor, my boots echoing on metal grating. The monitoring station was cramped, 3 walls of screens showing feeds from sensors we'd planted across a 50-kilometer radius. Jerry sat hunched forward, his face lit blue by the displays. "Started 20 minutes ago," Jerry said without looking away from the screens. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up thermal imaging. I grabbed the desk edge to steady myself. The implications hit like a physical blow. We hadn't just drilled into one pocket. We'd sent a signal, a wake-up call. The lights flickered, once, twice. Then the electromagnetic interference hit hard. Every screen in the room went haywire, numbers scrolling too fast to read, images fracturing into prismatic patterns that hurt to look at. The overhead fluorescence started that sick humming I remembered from the cavern. "The temple," Jerry breathed. "Look at the drill site feed before it cuts out completely." Through the static, I caught glimpses. The structure we'd found, that ancient building of impossible geometry. It was glowing, not with reflected light. The stone itself had become luminescent, pulsing with the same rhythm as everything else. The main power grid failed 30 seconds later. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The backup generators groaned to life, but half the systems stayed dark. Communications went first. Satellite uplink, radio array, even the short-range walkies started screaming static. McDonald's voice boomed down the corridor before I saw him. "Alvarez, Park, command center, now." The command center felt like a tomb in the emergency lighting. McDonald stood at the main console, stabbing at controls that wouldn't respond. Holly was there too, along with Amber and Lewis. Everyone except Peggy. "We've lost external comms," McDonald said without preamble. "Whatever that thing in the temple is doing, it's generating an EM field strong enough to fry our electronics. We're cut off." "It's not just the temple," I said. "The organisms under the ice. They're all responding to our specimen, like it's calling them." Holly's eyes lit up with something that wasn't quite excitement. "Of course, a distributed intelligence. The sample isn't just tissue. It's a node in a larger network." "I don't give a damn what it is," McDonald snapped. "We need to..." The lights went out completely, even the emergency reds. For 3 heartbeats, we stood in absolute darkness. Then, the bioluminescence began. It started as threads of green light racing through the walls, the same phosphorescent veins we'd seen in the deep ice, somehow inside our station structure. They pulsed in that now familiar rhythm, casting sick shadows that moved independent of their sources. When the emergency power stuttered back online, Peggy stood in the doorway. "The convergence has begun," she said. Her voice was hers but wasn't. Same pitch, same accent, but the cadence all wrong. Too measured, too precise. Her eyes reflected the green light in the walls like a nocturnal animal's. "Peggy?" Holly stepped forward. "What convergence?" "The awakening was always inevitable once the seal was broken. You are witnessing the first phase of reclamation." Lewis raised his camera instinctively, then lowered it. What was the point? Who would ever see the footage? "Get Dr. Lee," McDonald ordered Amber. "Sedate her if you have to." Amber didn't move. None of us did, because Peggy wasn't alone anymore. Jackson appeared behind her, his scarred hands hanging loose at his sides. Same empty expression, same wrong voice when he spoke. "Sedation serves no purpose. The integration has begun." Integration. That word hit me like ice water. I'd been thinking of it as infection, maybe possession, but integration meant something else entirely, not replacing us, incorporating us. "The specimen," I said, understanding flooding through me. "It's not trying to break out. It's been broadcasting, calling them here." Peggy tilted her head at an angle no human neck should manage. "You show promise. Your neural patterns indicate compatibility." Holly laughed. Actually laughed. Compatibility for what? For preservation of knowledge. Your species has developed useful technologies during our dormancy. This information will ease the reclamation. The lights failed again. In the darkness, I heard movement. Shuffling feet. Breathing that wasn't quite right. When power returned, half the room had changed. Jerry stood perfectly still, his face blank as fresh snow. Dr. Lee beside him, her medical knowledge probably already cataloged and absorbed. Two of the drill crew whose names I'd never learned, all standing with that same unnatural stillness, all looking at the rest of us with eyes that held too much intelligence. "Don't fight it," Jerry said in that not Jerry voice. "The process is painless. Your consciousness remains merely expanded." McDonald reached for his sidearm. His hand never made it. Amber, when had Amber joined them, moved faster than human reflexes should allow. She didn't strike him, just touched 2 fingers to his temple. McDonald's eyes rolled back. When they opened again, he was gone. The military bearing remained, but inhabited by something that had never worn a uniform. "Tactical knowledge acquired," the thing wearing McDonald's face announced. Resistance protocols understood and countered. Holly and I backed against the console. Louis had dropped his camera, pressing himself into the corner. We were the only ones left. "Why?" Holly's voice cracked. "You were dormant for millions of years. Why now?" Peggy answered, though every one of them turned to look at us in perfect unison. "You broke the seal. The ice was not our prison. It was our chrysalis, waiting for the right conditions, the right level of technological development in the species that would find us." "You're parasites," I spat. "Symbionts," Jerry corrected. "Your knowledge becomes ours. Our capabilities become yours. Observe." He placed his hand on the dead console. The screens flared to life, not with our operating system, but something else. Symbols flowed like living things, reconfiguring our primitive technology into something beyond recognition. Through the static, I glimpsed other stations, other places around Antarctica where the same scene played out. Casey Station, figures moving with inhuman precision through the corridors. Vostok, researchers standing in perfect formation as green light pulsed through the ice cores they'd drilled. Every human outpost on the continent, all synchronized, all falling to the same ancient intelligence. "We ruled this world before the ice," Peggy said. "Before your species drew its first breath. The climate changed. We adapted, slept, waited. And now?" The thing wearing McDonald's face smiled. "Now we reclaim what was always ours, improved by your contributions to the ecosystem." Holly grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "The secondary protocols," she whispered. "The thermal lance overrides. They could generate enough heat to..." To destroy this station and everything in it, Amber finished. Yes, we know. Jackson's knowledge included those modifications. Jackson stepped forward. You could end your physical forms, but we are not bound to single bodies anymore. The network persists. The awakening continues. Through the windows, I saw them, rising from cracks in the ice like prayers made flesh, translucent beings of impossible beauty and terror, each one pulsing with that same rhythm that now beat in my former colleagues' chests. Choose, Peggy said. Integration or isolation? Join the network or watch as your species is upgraded without you. Holly's grip tightened. Lewis whimpered in his corner, and I stood there, watching my friends' faces worn like masks, knowing that everything we'd built here, every research station, every outpost of human knowledge in Earth's last frontier, had become a beachhead for something older than memory. The Integrated moved with perfect coordination, their fingers dancing over our equipment, not destroying it, improving it. Each console they touched bloomed with new capabilities, reaching out through quantum entanglement or some science we hadn't discovered yet to connect with other sites, other nodes in their crystallizing network. I watched Peggy, the thing puppeting Peggy, establish contact with something under the Ross ice shelf. Watched Jerry linked to sensors beneath the Transantarctic Mountains. Watched as a map built itself on our screens, showing every deposit of their kind beneath the ice, all awakening, all connecting, all preparing to emerge into a world they'd ruled before mammals dreamed of consciousness. Your species showed such promise, the McDonald thing said, almost sadly. But evolution requires integration. The age of isolation ends now. They worked with inhuman precision, each movement calculated and necessary. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Just the steady, inexorable progress of an intelligence that had waited geological ages for this moment. And I could only stand there, Holly's nails drawing blood through my thermal gear, watching the beginning of the end of human autonomy unfold with the elegant efficiency of a solution to an equation we'd never known we were part of.